Like a lot of people, I love an origin story, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at the origin of the Skyline GTR. The Skyline model was originally released in 1957 under Prince Motor Company. The Skyline started with a 1.5 liter but was upgraded to a 2.0 inline 6 in 1964 and had the GT added to its name. This was also the first year that the Skyline got its first taste of racing by competing in the Japanese Grand Prix, but it ended up finishing in second behind the Porsche 904 GTS. By 1967, Nissan and Prince Motor Company had merged under the Nissan brand, and the following year, the third generation Skyline was released. Known internally, the sedan was referred to as the PGC10, and the coupe was called the KPGC10. But outside of the company, the car picked up the name Hakosuka, which came from Hako meaning boxy and Suka meaning sky, or boxy skyline. The C10 GTR was a homologation car and continued with the 2-liter inline 6, but this engine was built for racing, with twin cams, 4 valves per cylinder, and 3 Weber carburetors. And this is back in 1969. It achieved its peak power of 160 horsepower at 7,000 RPM. The first of these GTRs was released as a sedan, and they were exclusively available in Japan through Nissan's dealership network. Unlike the 64 GT, this car dominated on the racetrack, winning 49 races in a row, until the streak was ended by a Mazda RX-3, which I hope they add to the game. By the end of the C10's run in 1972, it had secured 1,000 victories. The C10 Skyline GTR was a lightweight, road-legal race car with no sound deadening. It had a limited slip differential and a 5-speed manual transmission. The interior of the car is very minimalist, as you would expect from a racing machine. It has a 3-spoke steering wheel, bucket seats, and the wood trim look is created through adding vinyl stickers. This is my real-life dream car, and I hope to own one of these one day in real life, so I don't know if I can objectively tell you whether or not you should buy one in the game, but in terms of legendary cars, this car comes in between $140,000 and $170,000. So I tend to buy one every time they end up in the shop and add another one to my garage. Anyway, let's go ahead and take it back to Tokyo and see how it handles our lap. We're going to test the Skyline with the factory engine first. Although in stock form this car is naturally aspirated, it does allow you to put on turbos, so this is a medium turbo that we're testing on this example. Coming in at just under 2,000 pounds, this car is lightweight and very predictable in the corners. It does have a slight tendency to oversteer with the setup I have, but that kind of makes it fun. So it's actually one of the cars I listed on my go-to vehicles for Le Mans. Part of that is also because this is one of my dream cars, so take that with a grain of salt. After modifying the engine, it ends up at 447 horsepower and 278 foot-pounds of torque. So with that lightweight chassis, it's got a lot of power, but it does end up getting a little bit heavy on the fuel consumption, and we end up getting, with our current setup, around 5 laps out of it. After the ultimate mods, the car's peak RPM jumps from around 7,000 up to 10. So it can make setting up the transmission a little bit difficult, as you're not going to go by the kilometers per hour they're suggesting, because they're looking at a 7,000 RPM red line. The power band is very predictable on this car though as well, so as that power is increasing, it doesn't come and shock you. That'll come up later when we look at the engine swap. With the tires, it treated them pretty well, so we got about 5% wear to the front tires and about 10% to the rear. This could possibly be tuned away as well if you got rid of some of that oversteer, but I kind of enjoy the way it drives as it is, so I didn't mind keeping some of that in the car. If you are taking this car out on Le Mans in its current setup, just adjust the fuel map accordingly and kind of keep an eye on the weather and adjust it as needed, and it'll do just fine. It looks like we're about to make our final approach, and this car ended up crossing the line at 2 minutes 6 seconds .337, putting it down in 37th place behind the Cobra Daytona Coupe and just in front of the Mazda 3 with the factory engine. Let's go ahead and take a look at the motor swapped option. The Hako gets its engine swap from the Skyline Super Silhouette, built in the early 80s on the R30 Skyline, and it was built as a race car, so this is a true racing motor even though it's dropped down from 6 cylinders to 4. When Gran Turismo talked about adding engine swaps, my hope was doing this car with a RB26, but this is what we'll have to deal with. The swapped Hakosuka gets a boost in power by 296 horsepower, bringing it up to 743. The torque ends up at 528, which is an increase of 250 torque. And it actually loses a little bit of weight, so it ends up at 1,881 pounds, shedding 108. The performance points, on the other hand, only go up by 2.28, which is the lowest I've seen in any of the engine swaps. The car is very manageable with the power it earns, but the downside is it's a very peaky power. So around 6,000 RPM, the boost kicks in and gets a massive surge, even with a medium turbo. So it ends up creeping up really fast and can catch you off guard if you're not paying attention and just kick that back end out. The fuel economy, on the other hand, improves, and it gets around 7 laps with our current setup. But it does end up wearing the rear tires significantly more at 20% over the 10, whereas the front stays about the same at 5%. And this, I think, is due to that surge in power. Even if you're not losing the back end, it is breaking the tires loose. That peak power is also pretty short-lived on this car. So when you do end up getting that surge, you're going to be shifting out of it pretty quickly. So you really notice it after 7,000 RPM, but you're hitting the red line at 8,000. This car ended up getting a total lap time of 1 minute 58 seconds, .627, and that puts it right behind the engine swapped Suzuki Cappuccino and just in front of the Toyota Celica GT4 rally car. The base cars are right around 170,000, and the engine swap, if you don't win it, is 675. So it's not a bad car to have both in your garage. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you find this information useful, please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.